The sun hung low in the sky, casting warm hues over the coastal town where we had decided to spend our vacation. The salty air filled my lungs as I strolled along the beach, my husband's laughter echoing behind me. He was busy capturing moments with our children, their playful shouts mingling with the sound of crashing waves. I felt a familiar sense of contentment, yet something was amiss. A quiet restlessness stirred within me, an itch I couldn't quite scratch. Our days were filled with family activities, visiting local attractions, dining at quaint restaurants, and lounging by the pool. Yet, as I watched couples around me share knowing glances and intimate conversations, I felt a pang of longing for a deeper connection that had faded in my own marriage. My husband and I had settled into a routine that left little room for anything beyond the mundane. It wasn't that I didn't love him, it was just that love had morphed into something predictable. One afternoon, while wandering through a bustling local market, the vibrant colors and lively chatter enveloped me. Vendors called out their wares: ripe tomatoes, fresh herbs, handmade crafts. My senses awakened to life's possibilities. As I turned to admire a display of handmade jewelry, I nearly collided with someone. Looking up, I found myself face to face with Tom, my husband's boss. Surprise washed over me, he was supposed to be away on business. "Fancy seeing you here," he said with a smile that lit up his face. My heart raced unexpectedly at his presence. "I didn't expect to run into you," I replied, trying to maintain my composure while feeling an inexplicable pull toward him. We exchanged small talk about the market and its offerings. His easy charm drew me in further. As we walked together through the stalls, our conversation flowed effortlessly. He shared stories about his travels while I laughed at his anecdotes about office life, stories that felt so distant from my own world yet tantalizingly close at the same time. The way he listened made me feel seen in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my husband asking where I was and if everything was okay. A wave of guilt washed over me as reality crashed back in. "I should get back," I said reluctantly, glancing at Tom's face for any sign of disappointment. "Of course," he replied softly but lingered for a moment longer than necessary before stepping aside to let me pass through the crowd. I walked away feeling exhilarated yet conflicted. The connection we had shared felt electric, a stark contrast to the routine conversations with my husband about grocery lists and school schedules. But guilt gnawed at me as well. Loyalty to my husband tugged at my conscience like an anchor dragging through water. As I rejoined my family on the beach later that evening, laughter erupted around me again, my children splashing in the waves while their father cheered them on from shore. But all I could think about was how easily Tom had made me feel alive again, how one brief encounter had shaken the very foundation of what I thought was solid ground beneath us. The sun dipped below the horizon as twilight settled in. Fireflies began to dance around us like tiny stars come to life. My husband wrapped an arm around my shoulders, a gesture once comforting but now felt heavy with unspoken words between us. "Did you have fun today?" he asked casually but with an undertone of concern that didn't escape me. "Yeah," I replied too quickly, avoiding his gaze as memories of Tom lingered like an echo in my mind. The evening wore on without incident until we returned to our rental house for dinner. As we settled around the table filled with fresh seafood and local produce from our market adventure earlier in the day, laughter echoed once more, but this time it felt forced on my part. I excused myself after dinner under the pretense of cleaning up while inwardly battling feelings of confusion and guilt that threatened to overwhelm me like waves crashing against rocks during a storm. My phone buzzed again, a message from Tom this time: "Great running into you today." My heart raced anew as excitement mingled with fear coursed through me like electricity sparking between two wires ready to ignite something dangerous yet thrilling. In this moment alone amid dishes piled high around me, the weight of choices loomed large before me. Should I respond? What would happen next? The clock ticked loudly in silence as uncertainty thickened around me like fog rolling off the ocean, threatening to engulf everything familiar if only for just one fleeting moment. I stood frozen, my phone still buzzing in my hand. The sound of my husband's voice echoed in my mind, urging me to answer. I hesitated, caught between two worlds. The cafe where I'd just shared a moment with him felt like a distant memory now, yet the warmth of that connection lingered. With a deep breath, I finally hit ignore. I didn't want to face the reality of my life just yet. Instead, I turned back to the table where he had sat across from me moments before. The scent of coffee and pastries hung in the air, a bittersweet reminder of our conversation. My thoughts were jumbled, guilt clawed at me as I recalled how easily we had slipped into intimacy. The boss had invited me to meet again, and part of me craved that connection. "Let's meet tomorrow," he had suggested casually, as if it was nothing more than a friendly chat over coffee. Yet, it was so much more than that. I could feel the pull towards him growing stronger with each passing moment. As I walked out of the cafe, the sun shone brightly against my skin, but it felt oddly muted. The world around me buzzed with life, children laughing at a nearby playground, couples strolling hand in hand, but all I could focus on was the weight of my secret. My heart raced again as memories flooded back, his smile, his laughter, how our lips met for that brief moment, nos besamos, and everything else faded away. I knew I should feel guilty for what was happening between us. But guilt mingled with excitement as I wandered through the streets. My marriage had become monotonous, conversations with my husband often felt rehearsed and obligatory. This new connection felt alive and vibrant, a stark contrast to what I'd grown accustomed to. That evening, while preparing dinner for my husband, I found myself lost in thought again. As pots simmered on the stove and spices filled the air with their fragrant aroma, my mind drifted back to our plans for tomorrow. Would he really be waiting for me? Would we cross an invisible line? Just as these thoughts spiraled deeper into uncertainty, my phone buzzed once more. This time it was a message from him, "Looking forward to seeing you." A thrill ran through me despite the tightening knot in my stomach. What was happening? Was this really worth it? The kitchen door swung open suddenly. There stood my husband, looking weary from work but smiling nonetheless. "What are you cooking?" "It smells great," he exclaimed cheerfully. I forced a smile back at him while suppressing the chaos inside me. "Just some pasta," I replied lightly. He leaned in for a kiss on the cheek before settling down at the table with his newspaper spread out before him. As he flipped through pages filled with headlines about local events and sports scores, familiar territory, I couldn't shake off an unsettling feeling creeping up on me like shadows at dusk. "How was your day?" he asked casually without looking up. "It was fine," I managed to say while stirring sauce aimlessly. We exchanged small talk over dinner. Laughter occasionally broke through moments of silence that felt thicker than usual between us. Still, beneath it all lay an unspoken tension that neither of us dared to address. The growing distance between us became palpable in every shared glance. Later that night as we settled into bed together, him reading another chapter of his book while I pretended to focus on mine, I felt trapped within these four walls filled with memories both comforting and suffocating at once. Sleep eluded me. Instead, visions danced behind closed eyelids, his voice whispering sweet nothings while our bodies intertwined seamlessly. Then reality struck hard, the weight of deception pressing heavily upon my chest like an anchor pulling me under. Morning came too soon. Sunlight streamed through curtains casting patterns across our room, a stark contrast to how darkly conflicted everything felt inside me. Breakfast passed in silence again as routine engulfed us both like fog rolling over water, a familiar comfort but one laced with unacknowledged discontent lingering just beneath its surface. After dropping him off at work later that day, his usual wave goodbye echoing in my ears, I drove straight home only to find myself veering toward our favorite cafe again instead of heading back home like any sensible person would do. There he sat waiting for me, his presence igniting something within that had long been dormant yet desperately craved acknowledgement. "I'm glad you came," he said softly when our eyes met across the table laden with fresh pastries and steaming mugs of coffee. We talked freely this time. Laughter flowed easily between us like wine poured into crystal glasses, a stark contrast against everything else weighing heavily upon my heart outside those walls filled with warmth and light where nothing else mattered except this moment right here. Until it did matter too much all over again when he leaned closer saying softly, "I've wanted this." Before long, caught up in an intoxicating whirlwind, we kissed again, vuestros labios se encontraron softly yet fervently igniting something deeper than either one expected or could fully comprehend. Suddenly reality crashed down around us when my phone vibrated harshly against wooden surfaces breaking through every spell woven around us just moments before. "Where are you?" It was him, the voice on the other end demanding attention amidst rising panic coursing through veins already fraught with tension from choices made thus far. The moment hung heavy between us as I glanced at my phone, heart racing. I had to respond, but the weight of my husband's question felt like a noose tightening around my neck. "I'm at the cafe," I texted back, hoping to sound casual. The boss, sensing my anxiety, leaned closer, his presence both comforting and electrifying. "Let's meet tomorrow at the market," he suggested, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. "You can tell your husband you're shopping for groceries." I nodded, feeling a mix of exhilaration and dread. The thrill of our secret was intoxicating, yet the fear of getting caught gnawed at me relentlessly. The next day arrived too soon. The local market buzzed with energy, vendors shouted their wares while children laughed and played nearby. I spotted him among the colorful stalls, looking effortlessly handsome in a casual shirt and jeans. My heart fluttered as he approached me, a smile breaking across his face that made everything else fade into the background. "Glad you could make it," he said lightly, but his eyes betrayed a deeper emotion. We wandered through the aisles together, picking out fresh produce and chatting about mundane topics, until he suddenly stopped and turned serious. "I've been thinking about you a lot lately." His words hung in the air like a promise. "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously, yet a part of me craved to hear more. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret only meant for us. "I've developed feelings for you." My breath caught in my throat. It felt both thrilling and terrifying to hear him say it aloud. Before I could respond, I noticed someone familiar in the distance, a mutual friend from our neighborhood. My stomach dropped as she waved enthusiastically in our direction. "Oh no," I murmured under my breath. The last thing I needed was for her to see us together like this. "Just act natural," he whispered back with a hint of amusement in his eyes as we quickly moved to hide behind a fruit stand. My heart raced not just from the thrill of being close to him but also from panic at being discovered. As we crouched behind piles of apples and oranges, our laughter mixed with fear created an intoxicating blend of emotions that overwhelmed me. Then suddenly, he leaned in closer again, our lips brushed softly against each other, nuestros labios se encontraron briefly before we pulled back with wide eyes filled with shock. "Did she see us?" I asked anxiously as we straightened up and tried to appear nonchalant while scanning the crowd for any sign of recognition. "I don't think so," he replied confidently, though uncertainty flickered across his face too. Just then, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my husband's name lighting up the screen. "Where are you?" "You've been gone too long." Panic surged through me as I glanced back at my boss. This was getting dangerously complicated. "I have to go," I said abruptly, unable to shake off the feeling that everything was spiraling out of control. "Wait," he called after me as I turned away from him reluctantly. "Can we talk later? This isn't over." His voice echoed in my mind while guilt twisted inside me like a knife as I hurried homeward. When I finally walked through the door of our house, relief washed over me momentarily until reality hit hard, the empty space where emotional connection should have been felt suffocatingly vast between us now more than ever before. "Where were you?" My husband's tone was sharper than usual as he stepped into view from the living room. Instinctively, I felt defensive yet guilty at being caught off guard by his sudden inquiry. "I just went out for groceries," I replied quickly while trying to keep my expression neutral despite the storm brewing inside me. He studied me closely before nodding slowly, but something about his gaze told me that he sensed more than what lay on the surface. An unsettling suspicion lingered between us like an unspoken truth waiting to be revealed. As dinner progressed uneasily around us, my mind drifted back to that brief encounter at the market. How exhilarating yet terrifying it felt knowing that someone else wanted more from me than just friendship or loyalty. The evening ended quietly. Exhaustion washed over both of us without resolution or clarity on what lay ahead. A sense of impending change loomed heavy in the air like thunder before a storm ready to break loose any moment now. The next day, I found myself wandering through the local market again, the vibrant colors and lively chatter around me feeling like a stark contrast to my inner turmoil. I was searching for something, perhaps clarity or a sign that would guide me through this confusing maze of emotions. As I moved past the fruit stalls, I spotted him. He was standing near the spice vendor, casually examining a jar of saffron. My heart raced. "Hey," he said, his smile warm and inviting. "Fancy seeing you here again." I returned his smile, but my mind was racing with questions. Was this a coincidence or fate? We began to stroll together, our conversation flowing easily as if we had known each other for years. He shared stories about his travels while I listened intently, captivated by his passion for life. "Have you ever tried cooking with saffron?" he asked, holding up the jar. "I haven't," I admitted. "But it sounds intriguing." "I could show you how to use it sometime," he suggested, his eyes glinting with mischief. A thrill ran through me at the thought of spending more time together. We moved deeper into the market, weaving through vendors selling handmade crafts and local delicacies. Each moment felt electric, every shared laugh drew us closer together. As we approached a stall selling fresh pastries, he leaned in slightly closer and whispered, "You know, there's something special about this place." The way he looked at me made my heart flutter, a mix of excitement and fear coursed through me. We kissed, I thought suddenly as memories flooded back from our last meeting. The kiss had changed everything. It had shattered my previous notions of loyalty and commitment. Now standing beside him felt both exhilarating and dangerous. Just then, my phone buzzed in my pocket, my husband's name flashed across the screen. Panic surged within me as I hesitated before answering. "I'm at the market," I finally replied when I picked up. "Everything okay?" he asked, concern lacing his voice. "Yes," I lied, glancing at my companion who was watching me intently. After hanging up, we continued our stroll, but an undercurrent of tension now existed between us. "Is everything all right?" he asked gently. "It's just complicated," I admitted reluctantly. "Complicated can be good sometimes." His tone was light but serious at once. We shared more personal stories as we walked. Each revelation deepened our connection further while simultaneously pulling me away from my reality back home. When he spoke about his childhood dreams and ambitions, it felt like we were building something intangible yet powerful between us, a bond that transcended mere attraction. Then came a moment where silence enveloped us as we stood near a quaint cafe tucked away from the bustle of the market. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air enticingly. It felt like an invitation to step away from our lives for just a moment longer. "Let's grab a coffee," he suggested softly. I nodded slowly. Part of me knew this wasn't just about coffee anymore, it was about taking another step into unknown territory together. As we settled into a cozy corner table inside the cafe amidst low chatter and soft music playing in the background, everything around us faded away except for each other's presence. "This is nice," he said after taking a sip from his cup. "It is," I agreed quietly while feeling an unexpected warmth spread within me, a sense of belonging that had been absent for far too long in my marriage. In that moment of intimacy shared over steaming cups and pastries dusted with powdered sugar, something shifted again within me, a yearning to explore what lay beyond these fleeting moments filled with laughter and connection began to take root deep inside my heart. Just then, another message pinged on my phone, this time from my husband again regarding an urgent work crisis demanding immediate attention back home. My heart sank. Reality was crashing back and like waves against rocky shores threatening to pull me under once more. "I have to go," I said reluctantly as I glanced at him apologetically. He nodded slowly but didn't say anything, his expression revealing understanding mixed with disappointment as if sensing this fragile thread connecting us might soon unravel completely if not handled delicately enough moving forward. As we exited the cafe together into bright sunlight illuminating our paths ahead filled with uncertainty yet undeniable allure lingering between us still, I couldn't shake off feeling torn between two worlds, one anchored in familiarity yet devoid of passion, another promising excitement yet fraught with risks waiting patiently just beyond reach. The choice loomed large before me like an unyielding shadow stretching across both futures intertwined intricately yet painfully apart. Would I dare embrace what lay ahead or retreat back into safety where love felt increasingly hollow? The invitation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken possibilities. "Let's grab a drink after work," he suggested, his voice low and inviting. I felt my heart race at the thought. This was a pivotal moment, one that could change everything. The thrill of the unknown danced tantalizingly close, but self-doubt whispered warnings in my ear. As I walked away from him, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. He would be leaving soon, perhaps for good, and I had to decide whether to pursue this connection or retreat back into my mundane life. My mind raced through the implications of each choice. Would I really risk everything for a fleeting moment of passion? Later that evening, I sat on my bed scrolling through my phone, staring at a text from my husband asking about dinner plans. The warmth of our home felt suffocating now, filled with memories that seemed to echo louder than before. "I'll be home late," I replied, though guilt gnawed at me like a persistent itch. When the clock struck 6, I found myself standing outside the bar where we had agreed to meet. The dim lighting inside felt comforting yet charged with tension as I entered. He was already seated at a corner table, a glass of whiskey waiting for me. "You came," he smiled, and for a moment, the rest of the world faded away. We talked easily at first, about work, vacation plans, and life in general, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper simmering just below the surface. As he leaned closer to me across the table, our conversations shifted from casual to personal. "I've enjoyed getting to know you," he said quietly. His gaze held mine with an intensity that made my breath hitch. Suddenly, reality crashed back and like a wave against rocks. How could I let myself fall deeper into this? Just then, my phone buzzed with another message from my husband. "Are you okay? You seem distant." My stomach twisted as guilt washed over me again. He was sensing something was wrong. "Everything's fine," I texted back quickly before forcing myself to focus on him again. But it felt like a fragile thread connecting me back to reality was fraying fast. "Are you sure?" he asked softly after reading my expression. "You seem conflicted." His concern felt genuine and drew me closer despite my better judgment. "I'm just tired," I replied too quickly, avoiding his eyes as shame crept in again. It wasn't entirely untrue. I was exhausted from juggling my feelings and responsibilities, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Then he leaned back slightly and took a sip of his drink before casually dropping another bombshell. "I'll be leaving town next week." My heart sank at his words. Suddenly everything felt more urgent than ever. "Leaving? For how long?" My voice wavered as uncertainty gripped me tightly. "Probably for good," he said matter-of-factly while looking down into his glass as if searching for answers there instead of facing me directly. A silence stretched between us like an unbridgeable gap filled with unsaid words and emotions swirling chaotically around us. What did this mean for us? Would we even have time left together? I didn't know. I started but trailed off as confusion clouded my thoughts once again. He looked up suddenly with an intensity that made me shiver slightly despite myself. I want you to know that whatever happens next week, it's been real. His admission sent chills down my spine. Part of me wanted desperately to reach across the table and grasp his hand while another part screamed in protest against such reckless abandon. Just then another notification pinged on my phone, a missed call from my husband followed by another message. Can we talk tonight? Panic surged within me as dread settled heavily on my chest like an anchor pulling me down into murky waters where clarity seemed impossible. I think, maybe we should go, I stammered out loud without fully processing what those words meant, yet they felt like both freedom and imprisonment all at once, a final decision hanging precariously in balance between desire and loyalty. He nodded slowly but didn't push further. Instead, we both sat there lost in our thoughts until finally deciding it would be best to leave before either of us changed our minds entirely about what lay ahead or behind us. An uncertain path filled with potential heartbreak looming ominously just around every corner, waiting patiently for its chance to strike when least expected. As we stepped outside into the night air thick with humidity clinging uncomfortably against our skin, uncertainty loomed larger than ever before. What would tomorrow hold? Would this be goodbye or merely another beginning fraught with complications yet still worth exploring despite all consequences looming ahead? Before stepping away from him completely, I turned one last time, catching his eye briefly filled with longing mixed equally alongside regret. Our worlds were forever altered now and there would be no easy way back. I stood at the hotel room door, my heart pounding in my chest. The moment felt surreal, suspended in time. We had agreed to spend the night together, yet doubt crept in like a thief in the night. I could hear his breath behind me, steady but filled with anticipation. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Inside, the room was dimly lit, creating an atmosphere heavy with unspoken words. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the city lights. I didn't think you would come, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced at the thought of what we were about to do. I stepped closer, feeling the weight of my choices pressing down on me. This feels wrong, I admitted, though every part of me craved this connection. He turned to face me fully, his expression serious yet inviting. Sometimes wrong feels right, he replied, taking a step toward me. As we embraced, a knock at the door shattered the moment's intensity. My body tensed instantly, panic surged through me like electricity. Who is it? I called out hesitantly, hoping it was just room service or a mistake. It's me, came a familiar voice, my husband's voice, cutting through the air like a knife. My heart sank as I exchanged glances with him. Uncertainty flickered between us like a candle's flame about to be extinguished. Stay here, he urged quietly as he stepped back toward the wall, his eyes wide with concern and fear of discovery. I nodded but felt paralyzed by indecision. The knock came again, this time more insistent. Open up. My husband's tone shifted from casual to demanding. The reality of my situation crashed down on me like waves against rocks. I was caught between two worlds, one that promised excitement and passion and another that represented stability and commitment. I need to get rid of him, I whispered urgently as I moved toward the door, adrenaline coursing through my veins. He can't see you. Wait, he hissed as I reached for the doorknob, desperation etched across his face. But it was too late. I had already opened the door just enough for my husband to see half of me standing there. Where have you been? His eyes narrowed suspiciously as he took in my disheveled appearance and flushed cheeks. I was just getting some air, I stammered awkwardly while trying to keep my gaze steady despite my racing heart. What's going on? He stepped inside without invitation, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on him standing in shadowed silence behind me. My world spun as realization dawned on him like thunder in a clear sky. "What are you doing here?" My husband's voice rose sharply, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Just talking," I managed to say weakly while feeling trapped between them, two men who represented different parts of my life but both demanding my attention now. "Talking? Is that what you call this?" His voice dripped with sarcasm as he gestured between us accusingly. "I can explain," I said desperately, grasping for something that might salvage this chaotic moment before it spiraled further out of control. But before any words could form on my lips, he stepped forward defiantly. "You don't need to explain anything," he said coolly while keeping his gaze locked onto mine, a silent plea for understanding amidst turmoil swirling around us both now. "I think you should leave," my husband interjected sharply as tension crackled between us like static electricity before a storm breaks loose overhead, the kind that leaves destruction in its wake if not contained properly first before unleashed fully upon unsuspecting lives caught unaware within its path forward ahead. "Wait!" I shouted, suddenly feeling urgency clawing at me from deep inside. I needed to make sense of this madness unfolding right before our eyes. "Let's talk about this." "We'll talk later," my husband replied curtly while stepping back toward me again, his protective instincts kicking into high gear now fueled by jealousy mingled alongside confusion swirling around us both still hanging thickly overhead like fog refusing to lift even slightly away from sight ahead. I watched helplessly as he turned away from us both, his footsteps echoing down the hallway outside fading slowly until silence enveloped everything once more leaving only lingering questions behind instead. "Now what?" he asked cautiously breaking through layers of tension still lingering heavily all around us. It felt suffocating almost but necessary too if any hope remained left unspoken still waiting patiently somewhere just beyond reach. "We can't go back," I whispered finally realizing how true those words rang out loud echoing within empty spaces left behind where once warmth filled every corner instead now replaced only by cold shadows looming large everywhere nearby too close for comfort still. I stepped out of the hotel room, my heart pounding in my chest. The air felt thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. I needed to face the reality of what I had done. As I walked towards the exit, the weight of deception hung heavily on my shoulders. The bustling market was just a few blocks away, a familiar place that once brought me joy. Now, it felt like a stage for my guilt. I navigated through the vibrant stalls, each vendor's cheerful greetings contrasting sharply with the turmoil inside me. My thoughts were interrupted when I spotted him, my husband, standing by a fruit stand, looking around as if searching for someone. "Hey there," he said when he saw me approach, his voice casual but his eyes narrowed slightly with suspicion. "Just picking up some things," I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a mask than genuine happiness. He nodded but didn't seem convinced. "You've been gone for a while." "I lost track of time," I said too quickly, feeling my pulse quicken as he studied my face. The tension between us was palpable. We exchanged small talk about our plans for dinner, but every word felt heavy with unspoken truths. As we walked side by side, I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something was off. When we reached the car, I fumbled with my keys, trying to ignore the nagging voice in my head warning me that this facade couldn't last much longer. Just as we settled into the car, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was him, the boss, calling to discuss his departure date. My heart sank at the thought of losing him so soon while sitting next to my husband who remained blissfully unaware of everything. "Are you going to answer that?" my husband asked, glancing at me with curiosity mixed with concern. "It's just work," I replied hastily as I silenced the call. The truth was far too complicated to explain in that moment. As we drove home, silence enveloped us like an unwelcome guest. The familiar streets blurred past as memories flooded back, happy moments from our past overshadowed by recent choices and betrayals. Each turn reminded me of how far we had drifted apart over time. Once inside our home, I felt suffocated by reminders of our life together. The framed pictures on the walls and the scent of his cologne lingering in the air made everything feel surreal. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from him confirming his departure date earlier than expected. My stomach twisted at the thought of losing everything. The thrill of secrecy and connection contrasted sharply against the backdrop of my mundane life. "What's wrong?" My husband's voice pulled me out of my thoughts. "Nothing," I replied too quickly again, forcing myself to focus on him instead of what lay ahead, a choice between loyalty and desire looming larger than ever before. That evening dragged on painfully slow as we shared dinner filled with polite conversation but void of real connection. My mind raced back to those stolen moments. The excitement mingled with fear, but ultimately left me feeling empty inside, as if something precious was slipping through my fingers without any way to stop it. After dinner, while cleaning up in silence together, he suddenly turned towards me with an intensity that caught me off guard. "Is there something you want to tell me?" His question hung heavily between us like an accusation waiting to be voiced aloud. I shook my head instinctively but felt cornered by his gaze piercing through layers built over years spent avoiding deeper conversations about our marriage's state or lack thereof, intimacy now glaringly obvious in this very moment, too close for comfort still. "I just want us to be okay," he said softly after a pause that stretched uncomfortably long before finally breaking free from its grip on us both, too tightly wound up around emotions left unaddressed still waiting patiently somewhere just beyond reach. I forced myself not to react visibly, instead focusing on scrubbing dishes harder than necessary, trying desperately not let tears fall down cheeks already stained from guilt weighing down so heavily within. As night fell outside our window casting shadows across familiar spaces once filled warmth now replaced only by cold emptiness echoing loudly within every corner nearby, too close for comfort still. I knew tomorrow would bring more uncertainty as secrets lingered unspoken yet still holding power over choices made, leading down paths unforeseen yet ever so tempting, even if dangerous, lurking just beneath surface waiting patiently. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. It felt like an anchor, pulling me deeper into a sea of confusion. My friend, Sarah, had called earlier, sensing something was off. I had reluctantly agreed to meet her at a nearby diner to talk things over. The weight of my choices loomed heavily, and I feared the conversation would only amplify my doubts. When I arrived at the diner, the familiar smells of coffee and pancakes filled the air. Sarah was already seated in a booth by the window, her brow furrowed with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. I forced a smile but felt it falter almost immediately. "I've been thinking about everything," I confessed, feeling exposed under her scrutinizing gaze. "The boss, my marriage, it's all so tangled." "Have you told your husband?" she asked gently, leaning forward as if to catch every word. "No," I replied, shaking my head. "I can't bear to hurt him like that." Her expression shifted to one of caution. "But you're hurting yourself by hiding this," she warned softly. As we talked, I felt a flicker of hope mixed with fear. Sarah reminded me that honesty could lead to clarity, but also warned me of the risks involved in revealing my secret life. "You need to decide what you really want," she urged, "before it all unravels." Just then, my phone buzzed on the table, a message from my husband asking where I was and when I'd be home. My heart raced as panic set in. He had never been this direct before. "I have to go," I said abruptly, standing up and grabbing my purse. "Think about what we discussed," Sarah called after me as I rushed out into the cool evening air. The drive home was a blur of thoughts and emotions colliding within me. Each streetlight illuminated fleeting memories of laughter and love with my husband, moments now tainted by betrayal and longing for something more exhilarating yet dangerous. Upon arriving home, I found him waiting in the living room, his expression unreadable but tense. "Where were you?" he asked quietly but firmly. "I was just out with Sarah," I replied too quickly, trying to sound casual despite feeling cornered. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking unconvinced. "You've been acting strange lately." "What do you mean?" My voice wavered slightly as I attempted to maintain composure. "Missing calls, late nights out." His words hung heavily in the air between us like an uninvited guest. Suddenly feeling trapped by his gaze and my own guilt, I decided it was time for honesty, at least partially. "I've been stressed about work and needed some space," I offered weakly. He studied me for a moment longer before nodding slowly but didn't seem entirely convinced by my excuse. The tension between us thickened like fog rolling in from the ocean. As he turned away towards our bedroom, something inside me snapped. Fear morphed into urgency fueled by adrenaline coursing through me. Shouldn't he know about everything? The affair? The lies? But before those words could escape my lips, another message chimed from my phone, a text from him, the boss, proposing one last meeting before he left town for good. My breath caught in my throat as conflicting emotions surged through me again, desire clashing with loyalty and guilt spiraling into chaos within seconds flat. How could this be happening? How could everything feel so right yet so wrong? I made a decision then that shocked even myself. Instead of confronting my husband about everything weighing on me or even considering ending it all with the boss once and for all, I chose to meet him one last time without telling anyone anything further. As night fell deeper around us like an impending storm brewing on the horizon, I felt both exhilarated and terrified at what lay ahead. The next evening, I found myself standing outside the hotel where he was staying. The streetlights cast a soft glow on the pavement, and my heart raced with each step. I had told myself this would be a final goodbye, but deep down, I knew it was more complicated than that. The weight of my decisions pressed heavily on my chest. When I entered the lobby, the familiar scent of polished wood and faint perfume surrounded me. I spotted him sitting in a corner, his expression unreadable as he glanced up at me. "You came," he said softly, a hint of relief in his voice. "I had to," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "We need to talk." We settled into a small booth in the bar area, surrounded by low conversations and clinking glasses. His eyes searched mine as if looking for answers in their depths. "I can't leave without knowing how you feel," he said finally. I hesitated. My emotions were tangled like the vines creeping up the nearby brick wall outside. "You know how I feel," I managed to say. The truth was too complex to articulate clearly. It was a mixture of longing and guilt. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. "What if we could make this work?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire, intoxicating yet suffocating at the same time. My mind raced back to my husband, his unwavering support through years of marriage, our shared life filled with mundane routines and quiet moments. "I can't just leave everything behind," I finally replied, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes. His face fell slightly as he processed my words. "But what about us? This connection is real." I wanted to scream that it was too real, that it had consumed every part of me since we first met at that cafe weeks ago. Instead, I took a deep breath and tried to focus on the present moment. "You're leaving soon," I reminded him gently, trying to ground myself in reality. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the table between us. "Tomorrow morning." The finality of those words hit me like a cold wave crashing against rocks, the end of something that had barely begun but felt so significant all at once. "I wish things were different," he said quietly, looking back up at me with an intensity that made my heart ache. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket, a message from my husband asking when I'd be home for dinner. Panic surged through me as I realized how much time had passed since I'd arrived here. "I have to go," I said abruptly, standing up from the booth. He reached for my wrist gently but didn't pull me back down. "Please think about what we talked about." I nodded numbly and hurried out into the cool night air, feeling lost and disoriented as reality crashed down around me once more. Back home, my husband greeted me with an unexpected warmth that made guilt twist inside me like a knife. He handed me a small box wrapped in bright paper, a gift for our anniversary that was just days away. "Open it," he urged with excitement in his eyes. As I peeled back the paper and opened the box, inside lay a delicate silver bracelet adorned with tiny charms representing moments from our life together, our wedding day date, our children's initials, memories etched in metal that felt heavy with meaning now. "Do you like it?" he asked nervously. I forced a smile while feeling tears threaten to spill over again. This gesture only deepened my internal conflict between love and betrayal. "It's beautiful," I managed to say through clenched teeth while thoughts of him flooded back into my mind, the boss who had stirred something within me that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As we sat down for dinner together, a meal filled with laughter over shared stories, I couldn't shake off the weight of my choices looming over us like dark clouds ready to burst open with rain at any moment. My phone buzzed again later that night. It was him confirming our earlier conversation about meeting one last time before he left town for good. A chill ran through me as I read his message. The finality hit hard again. It felt like standing on the edge of an abyss without knowing which way to jump or if jumping even mattered anymore. With each passing moment leading up to tomorrow's decision, between love and loyalty, I felt time slipping away like sand through fingers. I arrived at the cafe early the next morning, my heart racing. The sun filtered through the windows, casting warm light on the wooden tables. I ordered a coffee, my hands trembling slightly as I waited. This was it, the last meeting with him. The thought weighed heavily on me, knowing that soon everything would change. When he walked in, my breath caught in my throat. He looked different today, more serious, perhaps more resigned. I gestured for him to join me at a corner table. "Thanks for coming," I said softly, trying to mask the turmoil inside me. He nodded, his expression unreadable. "I wanted to see you one last time." His voice held a hint of sadness that mirrored my own feelings. We exchanged small talk about the weather and our plans for the day, but it felt hollow. The real conversation loomed like a storm cloud above us. "Have you thought about what comes next?" he asked suddenly, his gaze piercing mine. I hesitated, feeling the weight of our choices pressing down on me. "I don't want to lose you," he continued gently. "But I can't stay here." The finality of his words echoed in my mind like a drumbeat. I glanced around the cafe. Familiar faces blurred into insignificance as my world narrowed down to this moment with him. "You need to do what's best for you," I replied quietly, fighting back tears. He reached across the table and took my hand in his, an innocent gesture that felt charged with emotion. "I wish things were different," he said softly, our eyes locking in shared understanding. In that fleeting moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of loss. It was as if we were already saying goodbye. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the entrance of the cafe as a group of tourists spilled inside, laughing and chatting loudly. Their joy felt like a stark contrast to our somber reality. It was jarring and reminded me how life continued outside our bubble of despair. "I should go," he finally said after an uncomfortable silence stretched between us. "My flight is earlier than planned." My heart sank further at his words. This was not how I envisioned our last moments together. "Will you be okay?" he asked hesitantly as he stood up to leave. There was genuine concern in his eyes that made my chest tighten painfully. "I'll manage," I replied with forced confidence, but deep down, I knew everything would be different now. My life would never feel quite right again without him in it. As he turned to walk away, an unexpected wave of desperation washed over me. "Wait." I called out impulsively just as he reached the door. He paused and looked back at me expectantly. I just want you to know that this meant something," I stammered awkwardly, feeling foolish yet compelled to say something more profound than goodbye. A small smile flickered across his face before he nodded solemnly and stepped outside into the bustling street beyond. The doors swung shut behind him with an unsettling finality that echoed through me like a bell tolling for lost opportunities. My phone buzzed again, a message from my husband asking when I'd be home for dinner tonight. Reality crashed back down on me like icy water. Suddenly all those moments shared with him felt distant and surreal against the backdrop of my everyday life waiting outside this cafe's walls. With shaky hands, I typed out a response but paused before hitting send. What could I possibly say? My heart raced as guilt washed over me anew. How could I explain this tangled mess of emotions? Just then, another notification popped up on my screen, a message from him confirming his departure time once more, leaving in 2 hours. My stomach dropped as dread settled in. There was no turning back now. As I stepped out into the street after finishing my coffee alone, everything around me seemed brighter yet somehow dimmed by what had transpired within these walls just moments ago. The vibrant market nearby buzzed with life, vendors shouting prices and families laughing, but all I could hear was silence echoing within myself. I walked slowly past familiar storefronts that now felt foreign underfoot. Memories collided with reality like waves crashing against rocks, each one reminding me of choices made and paths taken that led us here today. To this moment filled with heartbreak and uncertainty about tomorrow's dawn creeping closer every second. In those final moments before leaving behind everything familiar, the warmth of sunlight on skin mingling with cool breezes, I realized how fragile it all truly was, love intertwined with loyalty tangled into something unrecognizable yet achingly real. And then it hit me, what if this wasn't just goodbye? What if there were consequences waiting just beyond sight?